The following production is intended for entertainment purposes only. We are not legal professionals. We do not speak for any government agency, and the opinions expressed here are our own. Relax.
So you are, where are you right now? Driving from, was it Kentucky or?
Yeah, driving from Paducah, Kentucky to back to Atlanta.
Okay. So where are you right now?
I'm about 30 minutes east of Paducah. I'm on my way back. Paducah is, I believe it's on like the Illinois border with Kentucky. It's way out west.
I feel like I've been through there before.
Yeah. It's kind of a common route to take when you're heading east, like to Virginia or
Yeah,
definitely
Nashville.
New Jersey. Yeah. You're going to come through this way.
Okay. So, and you were just dropping your son off, right? So just
Yeah.
a quick little turnaround.
Yep. I'm what deputies should be looking for. I'm driving across the country to make a quick turnaround.
Did I ever? I think I did. I'm sure that I did. But did I ever tell you or complain about that time I got stopped coming from New Mexico and I got a speeding ticket? And she didn't ask a single question about where I was headed or what we were doing or anything. I
No.
was so disappointed. It was just after, I think it was just inside Kansas, and we were coming from Albuquerque.
Wow.
And we had only stayed there. We stayed there overnight, so obviously, like the trip was legit. But I was just thinking, man, I wonder how many people she stops coming from Albuquerque or some origin location, and doesn't, like, it's just not even on her radar. Like, literally, the only thing she's out here doing is writing speeding tickets.
Yeah. It's because it's all they know. You know what? Interdiction is a thinking person's game. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Well, I wonder, obviously I was pretty heated because I got the ticket first off, even though it was 100% my fault. Like I'm just glad she didn't catch me earlier because I was really, we were cruising.
What did she write you? What did she catch you at?
She wrote it, I think, for 10 over, but I mean,
Wow.
I want to say it was in a 65, maybe 75, but I was doing 20 over for most of the trip. Like I had it coming. It was I deserved it for sure. But still, it just irritated me. Like, is that seriously what you're out here doing? Is that what they want you to do? Because, like, I'm not a danger. I don't think. I don't think that speeding in that scenario, on that highway, 20 over ain't, like, it's a non-issue. Again, I guess that's a matter of perspective because the law says differently. So anyway, so it's
You
just
started
you
to
and
ask me, that's the last I heard. You telling me that you got pulled over and you judged this lady for
yes, very harshly, I might add.
uh,
I don't remember what I was saying. I was really mostly just complaining about having gotten the ticket and, like, just frustrated that somebody's in that position, like that situation, with
you're
no,
sitting on a gold mine.
yes, man, and just has no idea.
So
I don't know, but
2 summers ago when I first got to Atlanta, I had to drive up through Kentucky, like to some spot in Ohio to do a swap over with Cameron and his mom. The same trip I'm making now, but it was at a different spot because I was also coordinating with another family. Anyway, on my way back, and I'm always kind of bummed, especially if I'm driving by myself on the way back. I just drop off Cameron. It's the end of our visit, so I'm always kind of bummed. and I got to make up time because it's already the evening and I'm driving back from BFE. It was actually, yeah, it was Ohio through Kentucky. And Waze took me through this backwater town. And, Barney Fife pulled me over. And I say Barney Fife, he was actually a young guy. Looks like maybe he could have been prior service, like he had the forearm tattoos and yada, yada. Well, he had me dead to rights. I was going over 75 in a 55, and he walked up, asked for my license. I was like, honestly, I left it in Georgia. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I came here just to drop off my son, and I'm turning around and going back. And I even said it. I said the thing that I used to listen for. I said, I'm just trying to get home, man. And as soon as I said, I was like, "Ooh, that's a landmine."
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have my license. He was like, "You got your registration?" I was like, "No, I don't." I was like, I even asked him, like, "Can you just run my tag?" And I have a disabled veterans tag, and I have a military sticker on the back of my truck, but you'd have to know some inside baseball to know that it's a military sticker. It's a Cleveland Indian. You know the Cleveland Indians mascot? Are they the Cleveland Indians?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the Cleveland Indians mascot, but instead of his ponytail and feather, he's wearing a ball cap with night vision goggles on it. But they're flipped up.
Okay.
And it's the mascot of a Naval Special Warfare unit that I used to be attached with, or that my command used to work for. And it's just kind of a cool guy sticker, but it doesn't say U.S. Navy on it. There's no guns or anything. You have to know, like I said, you have to know the military. But me over with a hot turn, no license, no registration. I didn't have service, so I couldn't pull up my insurance on my app.
Right.
And I was like, dude, you got me dead to rights. He leaves. Oh, I had my expired Kansas license with me. I still have my expired Kansas license with me. I had my expired Kansas license, and I pulled it out, and he was like, "Here, I'll take that."
Now, did you have your military ID or sheriff credentials?
No. Well, I have my VA ID.
Yeah, I guess that would have been after. So that was after you left the sheriff's office. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so all I had was an expired Kansas DL on me. I had my VA ID, but I never pull it out unless I'm at the VA, or unless I need to get onto a base. I can get onto a base with it. But so he leaves, comes back. Like, I can tell he's just, everything he asked for, I give him a no. He's like, license? No. Insurance? Registration? Nope. I'm going 20 over. He comes back, gives me my expired license back, and said, "Hey, slow it down." And he goes, "Thank you for your service," and slapped the top of my truck as he's walking away. I said, "Hey, wait a," and of course, I'm open mouth and insert foot. I was like, "Hey, wait a second." And he turns around. I said, "Have you ever heard of interdiction?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, I didn't say anything about myself. I said, but I was like, have you gone to, or have you done any of these trainings? I might need to cut that out. Have you done any of these trainings? And he was like, yeah, I've done some of them. I was like, okay. And I just left it at that and let him walk away, because if I was him and I had that stuff, I would have already been inside the car.
Yeah. Well, but to be fair, you also would have already established like 3 stories of how you were 100% smuggling, 100% had a load of dope in that car.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's a home run.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that he didn't, I'm surprised he didn't have more questions about that. Because if somebody, obviously at that point, you're talking about information inside information, right? Obviously you're not hauling dope, but you would think that you would follow that up with, "Oh, are you an interdictor?" or have you been to those trainings, or like, are you an instructor? But he didn't want any of it, huh?
Well, there was a little bit more. So I never tell, even when I was at the sheriff's office, unless they asked for it, I didn't pull out my sheriff's ID. But afterwards, like after he gave me the warning and before I asked him if he was interdiction, I forgot how it came up, but it came up, I felt pretty naturally. I was like, actually, I'm a retired cop from Wichita. Oh, because I forget what it was, but it wasn't because of any questions for him. It came up as I'm a retired cop. And I feel like he let his guard down when I said I'm a retired cop, which I judged him on that for also. I'm like, dude, you should not let me go just because I say I'm a retired cop. Like I could be Saddam Hussein right now.
But at the same time, if he had asked for consent, would you have given him consent? You're breaking up.
I talk a big talk about libertarians. Oh yeah,
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
So if he had given you consent, would you have given consent?
Probably. I probably would have asked. I probably would have given it to him.
Yeah.
Just because he gave me, the trick worked. The trick would have worked. I mean, the same trick that I used. Giving someone a warning.
Oh yeah.
Is give them the warning, and then you're their best friend.
Yeah. So I'm watching the Olympics right now. I when we first started this conversation, I was on my way home from a couple of consultations, and now I'm in my basement watching the Olympics. Did you watch the opening ceremonies last night?
No, but I have not stopped hearing about how satanic and anti-Christian and anti-American it was.
Man, it's nonstop. That's all I'm seeing on social media. And
isn't that bad?
I mean, I can't figure out what the big deal is. I can't figure out what I've got some thoughts, but like I did not see it. I still haven't seen any videos of it. All I've seen are still screenshots or still shots from the performance or whatever. So again, I could be way off base, and if I watch it later on this evening, and maybe I'll look back on this and be like, oh yeah, I was way off. But I just don't see how they were mocking the Last Supper. Like I'm not seeing. Again, maybe if I watch it, I'll see it, but I don't know. It seems kind of strange to me. And I honestly, when you called a few minutes ago, I was in the middle of a conversation with a friend that was she was in kind of an embroiled, pretty heated conversation about this. Like she was offended and somebody else was like, you don't deserve to be offended. And it went back and forth. And I mean, there are people that are very upset about this. Okay. So I'm cautious. I'm aware of that. But yeah, man, it kind of feels like people are overreacting. And the other thing is, it seems like the rest of the world isn't obligated to respect your religion, or they're certainly not obligated to revere it. And one of the things we were talking about in the conversation I was having before this one is that there's a sense of, well, yeah, they don't have to respect mine, but then I don't have to respect theirs. And okay, you could say that, you could take that position, but doesn't that just end up hurting yourself? Like, I think that you end up shortchanging yourself by taking that position and saying, well, I'm just going to treat them how they treat me then. Because I think that the real life and the real satisfaction and fulfillment comes from you respecting somebody else's maybe religion or perspective, whatever, even if they don't respect yours. Because if we're just doing this tit for tat, like, okay, you showed me this level of respect for my ancient book or my religion or my philosophical view, so I'm going to give you the same amount. That just feels like a losing battle. I don't think that's the way to do it. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, what you're describing, I don't know. That's what Jesus. That was Jesus's message. Turn the other cheek. If someone makes you go a mile, go two. If someone asks for your coat or shirt, or and your belt or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What popped out to me was the scene from Chosen season 4, where these Roman soldiers made Jesus and his disciples carry their gear for a mile, and all his disciples started to protest and was like, "This is outrageous! You can't make them do this." And Jesus was like, "Hey, calm your tits." And, everybody picked this up. So they picked it up and carried it for a mile. Then because there was some sort of law that said a Roman soldier can make any citizen carry their gear for 1 mile, but not more than 1 mile. So when they got to the 1 mile mark, the soldiers were like, "Okay, you can go, you can drop it." And Jesus said, "Oh, no, no, no. We're going to go the other mile. How far away is your base?" And they're like, "Oh, it's a mile." And they're like, "Okay, we'll carry it the rest of the way." And you could tell everyone got really uncomfortable and big eyes. And the soldiers were like, "You don't have to do this." And they're like, "Hey, it's no problem. We weren't doing anything else." And made the disciples carry it the other mile. And that's when he dropped the line of, if anyone forces you to carry their stuff for a mile, take it 1 mile more. And if anyone asks for your coat, give them your coat and your shirt or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's no criticism, or at least it's not. I don't intend to criticize anybody that's offended by this, but isn't it kind of strange how I think that a lot of times we like to take a position of victim, like the world hates us because they hated Christ, and they're going to mistreat us because of this or that.
Yeah.
And we say that, and even some people would like welcome that. Like I see a lot of these posts are talking about strengthen your knees and prepare for battle. So I mean, maybe not battle, but that kind of talk. But then as soon as there's a difficulty, as soon as mainstream doesn't like us or the entertainment industry makes fun of us, then we cry foul. But we're saying that we're in a battle, we're saying we're in this culture war, we're saying that the world is going to get darker and darker, blah blah blah. And then when it does, we're like, this is so terrible. Like,
we turn into snowflakes
real quick.
We turn into snowflakes.
And it's, man, it's so quick that we're like, well, but if we did this, then we'd be canceled, or there's no way we could say this about Muhammad, or there's no way we could say this about Buddha, or there's no way we could say this about gays, or whatever. And it's just, I don't know, maybe it's all part of the same the same thing that's just kind of irritating me in general. Like we talked about the past couple of weeks with assuming that by saying God exists, I mean my God. Like it feels like we're being very what would you call it? Would it be ethnocentric? Or I'm not because it's not dealing with ethnicity. I just want my religion to be the one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast today, and I wanted to bring this up. It was Tucker Carlson and Ben Carson. Are you familiar with Ben Carson? He's a black surgeon, Christian guy.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll Quentin Tarantino this just a little bit. One of my big takeaways from this conversation is I really respected a lot of what Ben Carson was saying, but one of the things I realized is you cannot respect them. At least you don't have to agree with them on every single thing and still respect them. So Ben Carson brought up Louisiana. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, but I'm tracking with you.
Okay. Ben Carson brought up Louisiana governor that is and it got passed, is forcing the schools to put the 10 Commandments back up on the wall.
Okay.
And he was addressing saying, like, I don't know what there is to be offended about. How can you not agree with the 10 Commandments? Who agrees I think we all agree that it's good not to steal and not to kill, but something obvious. I mean, there's so many things that I take offense to putting up the 10 Commandments, but you're ignoring the first 5 that have nothing to do with steal, kill, and lie and covet.
Yeah.
Those are all about honor God. Second off,
Yeah.
you are forcing a religion, if not 2 religions, into people. And I mean, it just flies in the face of logic. Like, of course, people are going to be offended at this, but you are taking the position. You, Ben Carson, I'm talking to him, are taking the position that it's insane, and mocking these people, that they take offense to it because how can you not agree with all the good stuff? Like, well, how can you not see the potentially harmful part of this?
Yeah, because what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen if next week they want to put up the 8 noble truths, or I can't remember what or the 4-fold path or whatever. Then we're gonna be screaming about that.
Well, that was one of the best moves the Church of Satan did, start erecting their statues in these government places. And of course, it was super offensive at the time. My 13-year-old Christian sensibilities were very offended by that. But now, taking a step back, like, I think that's almost an appropriate response.
I mean, it's obnoxious, and it's offensive in the sense of it feels like they're taking, like, they're just proving a point, right? Like, it feels like, well, this isn't actually sacred to you. You're just trying to prove that, that, kind of like the person who says they're taking their emotional support cat or whatever on their planet. Like, you're like, come on, you're just trying to prove a point. But it's not for me to say, and it's not for, like, I think that we really run into problems when the government determines how sincere someone is, or if their version is allowed to be represented in the schools or in the courthouse or whatever. And that's kind of a major departure from where I've spent most of my life. Like you say, your 13-year-old sensibilities, probably my 40-year-old sensibilities would have been offended by the same thing. This is just recent that I'm starting to recognize the error in that way of thinking. But yeah, dude, my feed is just full of people that are offended by whatever happened last night with the opening ceremony. I was more offended that Snoop Dogg was a torchbearer.
You were offended by that?
I mean, not really offended, but there is there's a part of me that's like, wait a second, this dude is a self-professed, I don't know if I would say he's a self-professed killer, but I think that back when he was on death row, like Death Row Records, I feel like he had some pretty violent lyrics, and certainly talked about being a criminal and talked about selling drugs and all of these things that you would think you wouldn't want to represent the nation. But I don't know. I thought that, like, dang, is this really the guy that is going to carry the torch in for our country?
But I feel like that's also a really good reflection of how diverse the U.S. is. Like, especially compared to any other country. Like, even countries our size, say Canada or Mexico, like, they might be, or definitely like China or Russia, they might be geographically our size, but they don't have the diversity which I believe makes America great. They don't have the diversity and the history. And I feel like, it's obviously not perfect, but in a lot of ways, America is still an example, a country that can function. I don't know if it is right now, but can function and have lots of different points of views, and, perspectives. when compared to China, for example, and I say this, just by being told of what China is, it's very Chinese people first, you know what I mean? And the state controls everything. It's every other country is ethnocentric, like by default. They are
Yes.
our ethnicity above all else.
So, man, I hate to say this, but I didn't hear most of what you just said.
Oh man, I was preaching too.
I know you. I heard a few statements, and they were solid. Most of that was pretty digitized.
No, it's cool. I'm getting into Tennessee now, and I should have a lot better service in Tennessee.
Okay.
What I said is, what's the last thing you heard?
So you had just started talking about what I heard was the LA and like the cops kicking down the doors, and so there were people that like that was their reality. Yeah,
that was their reality. And if you did you see the movie about NWA with Ice Cube's son and Dr. Dre and all that?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's pretty good flick. It's worth a watch, I'd say. Their perception, their reality was LAPD using racist tactics, or at least in a racist way, using tactics in a racist way to kick in all the doors in Compton or in Long Beach, wherever there was crime, which happened to be in mostly black neighborhoods or mostly black cities, towns, to go in there as kind of jackboot thugs and randomly snatching people up and frisking them and getting their ID and throwing them in jail for not cooperating. Like that was their reality. And so that music was a protest against that, which I think is noble. Obviously not the lyrics weren't noble, but the protest against that is. Anyway.
Well, one of the things.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things that I just have to acknowledge is that even though I never saw those things, and it's easy for me to say, well, that doesn't happen. I've been a cop for 17. I was a cop for 17 years. I didn't like that. Just doesn't happen. Maybe not here, and maybe not in front of me, but that doesn't mean that it isn't happening elsewhere, or that it didn't go on for many years back in the up until the 70s, and even still, like there's probably some of that still going on.
Yeah, I remember explaining to you, or us having a conversation about them teaching the segregation laws that were in Atlanta in the Reconstruction period, and how there is racism, like explicit racism in the law still. Even I don't know, it was until very recently, like after post-Civil War, Atlanta specifically, because it was the big city in the South, was rebuilt by these Confederate generals and these Northern businessmen, and they did it in a way like they redrew all these lines to say basically black people weren't allowed into these different parts of the city, and it stayed like that until 70s and 80s. Like those laws were on the books, even though maybe they weren't enforced. I hope not,
right.
But those laws were on the books, and so you have generational memory. I mean, this is where the fire department and the National Guard was spraying down black protesters that were marching in the streets. There's footage of that.
Dogs,
like they have memories.
Dogs on people.
Yeah, sick. Yeah, and just beating the snot out of everyone with billy clubs, and like I said, the fire hydrants and the dogs and the shields. Like, you're right, it didn't happen in Wichita, but it happened. And so when Snoop Dogg represents the U.S., I like it, even though I didn't see it. Because I'm like, that is one of the things that America is. We are NWA and we are Taylor Swift. and we are Garth Brooks, and we are Deepak Chopra, even though I'm pretty sure he's not American. But we are all of these things. And so, like, if it was China, if it was China sending a representative, it would be a Chinese person. If it was Germany, it would be a German person, even though Europe is pretty diverse, but they're still nowhere near as diverse as the US. They definitely don't have the cultural history of diversity that the US does.
Yeah, that's
They
a good
actually
perspective.
Yeah.
So something I was thinking a while back, we may have talked about it, specifically when you think about Snoop Dogg. Like, I feel like either he is a victim of, and again, I'll say this carefully too, either he's a victim of middle class white America, or I wonder if middle class white America is a victim of him. And what I mean by that is, like, so you've got a guy that is singing about, now granted, I've never been a huge fan of Snoop. I liked that era of rap, but just I didn't care for him. But you've got a guy that's singing about crime and singing about all of these things, and he got very wealthy doing it. And you've got like soccer moms and kids like mine singing his songs and kind of embracing his thing. And but he's singing about, like, that wasn't life for him, right? He's pretending, I assume anyway, he's pretending that he did all of these things. He's pretending that life selling dope is great, and it's all these women and whatever he sings about, because I like I said, I didn't listen to his stuff, but presumably he's presenting a picture of something that's not really reality. Or is he just playing a role that we're paying him to play, and so he's kind of sold his soul, and he's a victim of, like I said, middle class white America? Or does that even make sense, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it makes sense. And you're saying it from your perspective, which
is generally right.
Yeah, of course, which is generally right. But I think it's both. Like, I think as a performer on anything, you have to church up what works and what sells. So, like,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, if he happened to sell some drugs, I don't know if he did. I know I don't know anything, but I had heard that he's Dr. Dre's cousin, and Snoop grew up in Long Beach, but Dr. Dre grew up in Compton, and it's pretty well documented how violent and crazy Compton was, and maybe still is in some parts. But either he did do this stuff or he saw it on a daily basis. I guarantee you, he saw crack dealers and drug dealers on a daily basis. And I guarantee you, he saw gang violence, and he saw police corruption of power or abuse of power, at least from his perspective, abuse of power. And like I said, that's pretty well documented too. I'm sure there's slants in that. But he saw all of that on a daily basis. What he's got to do to make it, to make it as a rapper, is he has to present himself as all of these things, and make it. He doesn't want to say, I'm a crack dealer and it sucks, I can't pay my bills, and I got roaches in my house. He's got to pump it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
but I think he became that also. You can do this with any mask that you put on or any character that you put on. Eventually you're going to become that thing that you're pretending to be.
Yeah, it's really no different. It's the exact same thing as probably a country singer from Detroit. Like, maybe they were cowboys, maybe they weren't, but they took on a persona, and that's just like that's what pays the bills, or that's the character that they are, or that they're playing.
I mean, I'll talk out of both sides of my mouth because I'm trying to give these people more compassion. I'm in a compassion and forgiving season of life, so that's where I'm trying to be. but I absolutely Florida Georgia line music
Yes,
because it's not country.
it's the worst, absolute worst.
It's hip hop in a accent, and I'm sorry that yes, I think there's been 20 years of that, and
Man,
I mean,
you
it's just like.
you
Oh, go
broke up
ahead.
again. You said you broke up again. You said it's Florida Georgia line. It's what kind of?
It's hip hop in a country accent. I mean, or
Yeah,
it's boy band music in a southern accent. Like just because you have a southern accent doesn't make it country. Some of my favorite country singers didn't have what we would call, I would say, a southern accent, like Johnny Cash and maybe Waylon Jennings, but really Waylon Jennings, he had a draw, but he didn't sound like a southerner. He didn't talk like this, you know.
yeah. I mean, the thing is that it just sucks. It's just such crappy music. Like,
To
we were
us,
no, this is like
oh, this is just a law.
scientifically fact that it's crappy music. And in fact, if you want a really good example of the worst kind of country, it's the soundtrack for that stupid movie I was talking about last week, Twisters.
Oh yeah.
Now, now apparently the guy who wrote the main song is Luke Combs, which I
Oh yeah.
I thought that I thought he was kind of an outlaw, maybe in terms of like the genre of music,
Yeah.
like Red Dirt, Outcast, outlaw, kind of not Nashville kind of guy. But that
I think
soundtrack is
he's
just
pretty.
is he Nashville?
I think he is. Yeah, yeah. I think he is now. I think he connected because he's fat and he seems like an outsider. I think he connected with that Red Dirt crowd. But if you listen to his music, it's pretty Nashville.
And so I think that's the problem with country music, is the Nashville country is just
Yeah.
garbage. Because it's, the Blake Sheltons and the Rascal Flats and the Florida Georgia Line,
Yes.
um, whoever this guy is, like it's just so bad.
I'll say it. I know who started it, and I've never liked him, and that's Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks is not real country, and I don't like him. I,
uh, I don't know about that. I feel like at least his one album, "Rope in the Wind," that was a solid album. I can
there's
hear you now.
a pretty famous quote about Garth Brooks, and they say Waylon Jennings said it. I can't remember what it was, but it's pretty scathing. I can't look it up because I'm driving.
Yeah.
But Merle Haggard confirmed it. They asked Merle one time if Waylon Jennings said it, and he said, "Well, Waylon was pretty grumpy in his old age, and he said a lot of mean things. I don't want to say it, but yeah, he said that about Garth Brooks."
Yeah. Well, that's when you're talking about Waylon Jennings or Chris Christopherson, or any of the classics,
Uh-huh.
Hank Jr. Like that's just a different animal altogether. That's
Yeah,
that's a different level.
that's my
Um,
favorite time. Those that's my crowd.
I would have thought that Rascal Flats is really, like, that's when I started noticing country music sucking. Was
Oh,
the Rascal Flats, Keith Urban. Um, Even there was a point where I thought Toby Keith was pretty good, but then, and I think it's when they turn pop. I think it's the pop country that ruins it.
yeah. Uh, I'll always respect Toby Keith, but I feel like he sold his soul a little bit. He really cashed in on 9/11 and George Bush
Uh,
Jr.
yeah, big time.
Yeah, and I feel like he rode that puppy to the ground.
Yeah, he kind of went Team America on his.
Yeah, what I have no problem with him going Team
No,
America.
no, no. I mean, like the movie, the soundtrack.
Yes, Yeah, exactly. You can tell he put all of his chips on that one spot. Like he cashed that in.
Which kind of maybe kind of along the same lines. Did you watch that or listen to that interview with, I don't even know his name, one of the guys from Big and Rich that Scott sent?
On Tucker Carlson? No, I didn't watch it, but I know he's pretty political. Did you watch it?
I started to, and I don't know. He was talking about how the song came to him and how it was what he was getting at. I don't know if he actually said it, but what he was getting at is that it was like laid on his heart from God himself. And I ended up turning it off. It just wasn't the things he was saying. I there would have been a time where I was interested in it, but at the moment I'm not particularly interested in it. But there was something that he said that kind of reminded me of like I just kind of like, it seems like a great marketing strategy to say, I've got something that's so important for you to hear. It was given by God himself, and I'm not doing any kind of, I'm not going to do any kind of marketing. I'm not going to promote it. I'm just going to let God handle it. Well, are you not marketing and promoting it as like, I to me, like, he's saying that this is some kind of supernatural thing, and it's that he's not going to promote it. At the same time, he's promoting it to to people that are likely going to respond to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's saying that to a group of people that want that kind of perspective. So it just seems,
Yeah.
now I did not listen to the whole thing, so they may have cleared it up, and maybe I'm way off base. But from what I listened to, I was just like, meh, I'm not quite falling for it.
Well, my knee-jerk reaction would be to say that's stupid and mock it. But are you familiar with the concept of the muse when it comes to inspiration? The
No,
muse.
but I do. I was going to ask you kind of something about like inspiration like that, but I'm curious, what is the muse?
So Joe Rogan talks about this, but he got it from Stephen Pressfield. And Stephen Pressfield, the author, he wrote Hot, which inspired the movie 300. He has a couple books about Alexander the Great, like the Afghan campaign, and they really are just works of art, like they're master classes. Those books. Well, he wrote a book called The Art of War, or no, The War of Art. Sorry, he wrote a book called The War of Art, and it's about inspiration and it's about all kinds of things, but it's about being successful and doing the work. Well, one of the things he talks about pretty heavily in the book is the muse, and how, like, going back thousands of years, the Greeks talked about this, and they invented the concept of the muse, and they described it as like that, like God gave me this idea. Like, this idea didn't come from me. I can tell you, I can point to the songs that I wrote, but this song was like from on high. And
Yeah.
so him saying that God gave him this, God laid this song on his heart, actually has some theological backup, like some pretty heavily documented theological backup.
Well, so I guess what I was going to ask, and it sounds like you already answered, is if you think, like, where does that actually come from? And that would require us to maybe have a better understanding or an agreement of what or who God is. But like,
Yeah.
do you think that whatever God is, that he could inspire someone, like he could create a song or a piece of art for somebody to give to the
Well,
world?
yeah. Well, yeah, I do, but not like in the fairy tale way, maybe. Well, maybe it is, but I think the secret, and he talked about this in the War of Art also, is what I would call the ritual. What it's showing up every day, sitting in front of your keyboard every day, writing 1,000 words every day, And if you do that every day, eventually you're going to write a masterpiece. And that's opening yourself up to the muse. And that's like, that's what he described as the process for opening yourself up to the muse. I think that relates to religion and even spirituality. And like the kind of spirituality that I'm into is like, you know, the woo-woo stuff. I like the woo-woo stuff. I think the real woo-woo stuff comes from meditating every day and like pouring your heart out, like for real, you know, doing all that stuff every day. I believe I got to where I am right now because of that, because I honestly sought answers that I could not answer, or answers to questions that no one could answer. And because I did it regularly and honestly, I believe led me to my spiritual place right now. If Rich or Big or whoever was constantly, and I believe, I have no reason to believe that he wasn't, if he was pouring his heart out and writing these lyrics, you know what I mean, and doing this every day for decades, I think eventually he's going to have the muse come upon him and give him something that's bigger than himself.
Yeah. Well, I do think that if you are in flow with the universe, if you're in connection with God, as again, however you describe him, that you will necessarily get inspiration, and you will produce things that are outside of this world, or at least out of the ordinary. To me, though, like, I just get so suspicious and cynical when you can see maybe somebody's angle for why they're saying that, and it's not, it's probably more of a me problem. Like he's probably 100%, like he genuinely believes these things, and it's just me being a cynical jerk. But still, I still just don't quite buy it, don't quite trust it.
Well, I don't think you're being a cynical jerk. You're doing what everyone does, and that's just seeing the world through your particular lenses. The problem is your particular lenses is jaded by 4 decades or more of spiritual abuse, you know what I mean, or spiritual control, or things that you have resentment against. And so if he's being sincere and honest, he might be, but because the only eyes you have are your own, you see it and think,
oh man, dude, that was something that Deepak said in that book, that I guess it's a book, whatever it is. If it was a book, I would have highlighted this in that audiobook that you sent me, where he says that something along the lines of, your perspective is the only. Do you remember what he said? Something about your perspective is the only perspective you can see, or dang, no, it wasn't that, because
well, he says that a few different ways in there.
I don't like the way I'm saying it, because you can see other people's perspectives, but your beliefs are the only thing you can believe. It was something interesting, like, well, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like, kind of like when we've talked before about, that mentor of mine that told me I was leaning on my own understanding, and I'm like, well, that's the only understanding I can lean on. Because even if I say, well, no, I'm going to lean on the Lord's understanding, that's still based in my understanding. So it was along the same lines as, like, whatever you believe it because you think that that's the way it is, and there's no way around that, at least logically. Like, you've got to believe what you believe.
I think that relates pretty well with, we've talked about this before, and you have this concept of the kid of criminals, you know what I mean, like the child that's born into a criminal family and raised in the poor part of town, let's say by drug addict, thieves, or whatever it is. Well, for that child to become anything other than that, is a true miracle, like a walk on water, split the seas kind of miracle, because that's the only perception that that child has. So you got to give I mean, the big view is to learn how to give yourself the same grace. But when you're dealing with, whatever the stereotypical criminal is that comes to mind, well, I bet they're a product of their environment. And it's real easy to judge their attitude from your perception, but
Yeah.
that is how the world works. You have to get one over on people, or else they're going to get one over on you. And the only way to feel good is to hit this pipe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's funny too, or interesting to consider. There's a lot of decisions that I made to end up where I am today, for better or worse, good or bad. But a lot of people, we judge a lot of decisions that we were never offered.
Yeah.
Like I can judge your decision for, well, why would you do that? That was dumb. Or how did you not know that was going to be the result? But I never had to make those decisions, or I never had the opportunity to make those decisions, or I wasn't forced to make those decisions or to choose between those things. And so it's really it's in that scenario, it's a matter of judging somebody for something that I have no idea about. I have no idea what it was like to see your parents using drugs or breaking a law or doing whatever growing up. So how can I expect somebody to make the same decisions I did when they weren't even given the same option?
Well, and think about how much choice you really had. Like, I know we all see ourselves in the driver's seat, and that's good to see yourself in the driver's seat, to own your accountability. But how much choice did you really have when you became a sheriff's deputy and a pretty staunch member of your church, when you were raised by staunch members of your church and a sheriff's deputy?
Well, I mean, I used to, I was only kind of halfway joking, but I used to joke that I felt like I had to be a good kid because my dad was a deacon. So he was going to find out if I did something wrong, like in the community, and B, he's a cop. So he's also going to find out if I did something illegal. So I was kind of forced into behaving, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, I could have done my own thing and I probably wouldn't have got caught. But a lot of who I became, a lot of who I am, isn't because I'm some kind of a great guy. It's because of certain expectations that were in place growing up that just kept me from having to make certain decisions.
Or maybe there's a combination of the things that forced you to make those decisions made you into a great guy. Not perfect, but a great guy.
Yeah. And that is one of the things that I try to remember and I try to point out whenever I'm critical of Western evangelicalism and the church and all that kind of stuff. Like, yes, I do think that, man, we've made a lot of mistakes and there's a lot that needs to change. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with, for the most part, I'm happy with who I've become, and I'm happy with the things I've been through, and like it's all part of the story, even though it maybe wouldn't have been preferred, but it's still what makes us who we are.
Dude, there is a guy that brought this up to my attention today. My son's stepdad brought this up to my attention today. And it's something that I know because I've articulated this to you, but it's hard for me it's near impossible for me to keep this in perspective just because I'm always such a Debbie Downer on myself. But he asked me how my professional life was going in this one area. And I said, to be honest, I'm taking a lot of energy away from that part and I'm putting it in other parts right now. And he was like, oh. And I said, yeah, I'm really focusing on, I do lots of things, but I have a handyman business and I substitute, and I'd really like to focus on my podcast. And that's just what I want to do. you know what I mean? I'd like to do my digital media. I'd like to substitute, and I like to do my handyman stuff. And the other areas I have, I'm not giving them up, but I'm just taking energy away from that right now. And he was like, "Hey, if that's what you like to do it." I was like, "Yeah, that is what I like to do. I am just gonna do that." And it made me feel so much better about myself, because I feel like I'm just, at least right now, how it feels is I'm just being more true to me. I'm just being more honest of who I am.
Well, what would it look like, and how cool would it be to be able to get to a place where you're just not trying to make things into anything. You're just accepting things for how they are. Whether that be relationships or business or hobbies, or every spiritual life, every aspect of life, instead of just constantly trying to make it better, make it bigger, make it faster, whatever, like just enjoying it for what it is. Like I just, what I find myself doing a lot of times is expecting or wanting relationships or friendships or whatever. Like there's always this kind of fear of, well, what if they leave, or what if they don't like me anymore, or what if this, or what if that, instead of just being like, well, we're friends today, like let's just enjoy that. Maybe we don't end up becoming best friends, or maybe we don't end up doing like running together, or whatever that is. Like at least I kind of feel like I'm constantly trying to make things deeper and better or bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
And kind of like with what you're talking about, like just kind of focusing on certain, like not trying to make all aspects of your life into something, just accepting them for where they are. And if right now it's a low energy kind of thing, then it's a low energy thing. It's not wrong. There's nothing bad about it. It's just maybe resource allocation.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I had a senior chief, and then he was the chief when he said this. He retired as a senior chief, I think. But he said something to me one time. We were doing this thing, and we were really cold. Like it happened to be, all of us were just shaking, and we were just bitching about how cold we were, and we would not stop. And he kind of turned around and he goes, "Hey, it's okay to just be cold. Like, you don't have to tell me about it. You can just be cold." And I'd like to say a light clicked. A light didn't really click then. I think I just kept on bitching. But that did stick with me. I'm like, yeah, I'm just cold. Just be cold.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that on myself, and I'm going to tell other people.
That's what I do. Oh, well, I have a version of that. But when you were saying that, that's what popped in my head. It was just be cold. Like, you don't have to tell me about it. Be cold.
And you don't even have to complain to yourself about it.
No. That's the thing.
Like
it's not personal. The universe is not trying to personally single you out. Like, you can still just enjoy this experience, or just experience the experience, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be cold. And then you'll know what cold is. And you keep on doing what you're doing. You've been listening to any good podcasts recently?
Dude, I'm still kind of not really listening to anything.
Cool.
I do want to listen to
those. That Deepak train.
Say what?
I said you're just riding that Deepak train.
Well, that's what I was going to tell you. Is you sent me those other two, so I want to listen to those. I really, even though most of my music is sad and depressing, bummer, I love listening to music, and so if I'm on a heavy podcast cycle, or audio books or whatever, then I don't get to listen to my music. So I kind of have a tendency to do one thing like super intensely. And
Yeah.
so it's either all podcasts or no podcasts. Right now it's you got anything new that you're listening to?
No. So I don't mind talking about it. Obviously, I'm not gonna put any family's business out there, but I lost a really close friend this past Saturday night, Sunday morning. And it was like, he was like a brother to me. He was a really close guy from the Navy. I say that, and I hadn't been communicating with him as much as I wish I had been, at least lately.
Yeah.
But I've just been wallowing in grief. You know what?
Yeah.
I think I handled it. I feel like I'm kind of proud of the way I've been handling it. I feel like I did everything that I would tell other people to do. I immediately talked to people, like based off of, conversations we had and kind of an intuition. I gave myself permission to just feel the grief, to feel sad. And so that's what I did. I was sad, and I talked, and I ran, and I just grieved. This week, I did not want to hear anyone's voice on a podcast. Like, I felt like, I don't know, in this weird way, I felt like it was insulting to the moment. Like, I don't want to hear Joe Rogan when a piece of meat died, 2 days ago. I don't want to hear, Theo Vaughn when the world lost something, I felt like. So that's what I was doing. Okay, I'm good.
Now, what's your normal method for, or maybe not normal, but what was your previous, how would you normally handle a grief like that?
Well, I can tell you the way I did handle it with my parents is not so much with my mom, but not as much with my mom. When my dad died, I flew in, went to the funeral. I flew from Virginia Beach to Oklahoma City, went to the funeral, I smiled for people and patted their shoulders, but I did not show any real emotion at all. And
was that intentional? Like, were you feeling it, or you just...
I don't know. I just didn't want to process it all. And there was, me and my dad had a weird history anyway. And that was the only thing I could see at the time was our weird history, because my dad was in a biker gang, and I say he was in a biker gang. Really what he was mostly a felon. He died when he was in his mid-60s, but he had spent over half of his life, like 35 years, I want to say, in prison off and on. And so he was mostly gone in prison for most of my life, but he was always in or out. When I was 11, like a month after my 11th birthday, he had been staying with us for a month, and he got picked up and sent to prison for a long time. And I never saw him again until I was 18, until after Navy boot camp. Like, so from 11 to 18, I never seen him face to face again.
Had you talked to him?
Yeah, I talked to him on the phone sometimes. I went and talked to him on the phone. We wrote letters. I was at a group home during most of those years, so he sent me letters when I was at the group home, and we had some phone calls, but not a lot. But when he got out, when he was 18, we were best buds. Like, he got out and like, hey, so glad to see you. He moved right in with my mom. Was really just taking advantage of her. And everyone was super forgiving, like, he's back. And so it was just great. Well, while he was with my mom and I was in Navy boot camp, I was out of Navy boot camp, I was in Navy A school, I want to say, he left my mom again and went back to some old biker chick that from back in the day. And I think it's because my mom was retiring and like the gravy train was gonna run out or at least get real tight.
Yeah.
So he uh yeah, he left my mom again. And so I was like, I am fucking done with you now. Like there's no coming back. And it wasn't a hate. I didn't hate him, but I had just written him off. I'm like, okay, you're out of my life. Like you've done this to my mom too much. I'm being foolish if I let you in my life. Well, while I was in that season is when he died. He had a car wreck and cracked his skull open pretty good. And he called me after this happened. He cracked his skull open pretty good. They were going to do surgery, but he always had a bunch of cysts on his brain. He thought it was from he abused cocaine for a lot of years of his life. And so he thought it was from all the cocaine, these cysts were. But either way, it was enough to where they didn't do surgery. Like it was too complicated that basically all they did is wrap his head up and put him on a lot of anti-inflammatories. So he had his head wrapped up, and less than a week later, he woke up to go to the restroom, and the pressure that he put on his head from going to the bathroom made him pass out. And when he passed out, he hit his head on the sink again, and he was just lights out.
Wow.
And so when my dad died, I bottled it all up because in retrospect, I think it was subconscious. I could not address those feelings and all that unresolved resentment and, flood of guilt on myself. Like, you wrote this old man off when all he was trying to do, I'm giving myself the guilt trip. And so I never really addressed that. And yeah, that's how I do it. With my mom, I grieved a lot for her. Like I cried a lot for her. And I was very, but I definitely, she died on the day that I took the test for patrol, December 18th. Yeah. And it's the same day we found out Allie was a girl. Ashley was pregnant with Allie. It all happened, those three things. Like, and I got news of all three things in the same phone call. My mom died. I walked out of taking the test. This is what happened. I walked out of taking the test for patrol. I had like 15 minutes phone calls. I called my wife. My mom and dad and we're having, so I cried a lot for her, but I mostly probably suppressed those feelings with alcohol. I would say I never actually grieved any of them.
Yeah. But now you feel like with your buddy, you're at least attempting, and it sounds like you've been successful, but you're attempting to just feel it, just let it be what it is.
Yeah. Some things that really helped me, even though I'll say it became overwhelming and I took myself out of it, is I was kind of a liaison for a bunch of information with other guys in the Navy. So I was getting information from my buddy's command when all this happened, but he had retired and was working for him as a civilian. I was getting firsthand information from them, and I was getting information from them that when they were talking to their family, and I was relaying that to all of the other Navy veterans that are out of the Navy and don't have any connection to them. I was relaying it. So like, every hour, multiple times on the hour, people were calling me or texting me or messaging me like, hey, what's going on with him in this? You know what's going on at the funeral? Do you know what's going on with his wife? Do you know what's going on with his kids? And so I was just constantly relaying all this information to where Wednesday night, I communicated to the fellas like, hey, I'm stepping out of this. You guys are going to have to find another source. This is becoming overwhelming for me. And they all respected that. And they all supported that. They're like, absolutely, you're good.
So
So
you feel like kind of the busyness of the first several days, did that kind of
yeah,
help you see it more as like more of a matter of fact and less matter of emotion,
I feel
or do
like
you think that's connected?
it helped me put my grief into motion. It helped me like, hey, I have something to do with this. And so it wasn't just something to do to avoid it. It was something to do to be productive in the situation. Yeah. So like talking, so relate, just, like I said, what I was doing was just relaying information. Like I felt like every time I talked about it, that helped. Like I'm gonna have to bleep that part out. I don't want his name in there, but
Yeah.
I was talking about him, and I was talking to people that I know were going through the same emotion, and we were crying together. We were crying together on the phone. We were crying together through messages, and you know what I mean? We were doing good grief work,
Yeah.
and we were doing it together. And I feel like that's what helped me with that.
Man,
I
you know
just,
what I think one of the best helps that people can give in situations like that is just somebody crying with you,
yeah,
because at least I don't know if it's for all guys, but at least guys from our world, one of the things that I think prevents us from healing a lot of times is we just don't grieve things, because
yeah,
it's such a practice, and it's legit. Like you have to stuff things down at least until the end of your shift. Like it's just
yeah,
not practical. It's just not practical for you to be crying on scene. And so to see other people kind of give, colleagues give almost approval for it, like, oh, it's okay, we can feel something.
yeah,
I think that's so useful, and so like you don't have to have the right words to say. You don't have to say any words, but I think
yeah,
just having somebody sit with you, and maybe it's cry, maybe it's laugh, and maybe it's just like whatever you're going through, just know that I'm going through it, or that I'm here with you.
yeah,
Because I know for me, like one of the main reasons I didn't, and still I don't know if I really have grieved my dad's death, was I was afraid. I was terrified that I was being pushed into a room that I wasn't going to be able to get out of, that I wasn't going to be able to escape. And so I just stuffed it, crammed it down on top of a bunch of other stuff. And I in hindsight, I realize now how foolish it all was. But there was a time when the only time I could really show emotion was when I was drinking whiskey. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
then it would get to where I think subconsciously, or maybe it was even consciously, I would drink to feel emotion, but then I would always end up getting sad. And so like this was embarrassing. We went to, I don't think it was I don't think it was New Year's. It was some event. We were at a friend's house where I'd had too much to drink, and I don't remember what all we were talking about, but I was like crying at the table. Like, what in the world? But it was just because at that point in my life, like I had so much emotion that needed to come out, and the only
yeah.
way for it to come out was if I just had drunk a bunch of whiskey. Um, then so it was a it was a bad cycle, not a very effective way to deal with grief. It sounds like your way is a lot better.
Well, and I have not, I mean, this is not a testament to me. This is a testament through the people that I've listened to, like including yourself and Wendy Hummel and Deepak Chopra and Anthony Robbins, and all these tools that I feel like I've really been putting into motion over the last couple of years. I've been doing this work. I feel like this was the opportunity for that to shine. And I even, like, I was thinking about my mom and my cousin Shannon and my dad. I was crying for them too while I was crying for him, because it
Yeah,
just it brought all that up. And I'm like, yeah, while we're at it, Mom. And while we're at it, Dad. And while we're at it, my cousin.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think
it's just
I
bubbling.
think that's good. I think that's good too, because just like it's not a one-time deal. Like, it's not like I've got this much grief allocated for this scenario, and then once I've processed it, now I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
you can, I think it's perfectly legit to add, your dad's grief and your mom's grief and anything else, loss of a job, loss of a relationship, to whatever, to your buddy. Like, it all comes from the same well. Um, and I think that's good. I think that's perfectly respectable to just let it all out.
Yeah, trauma.
Now,
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've got really great ideas for everybody else, and I've got some, some great techniques for other people. It's a lot easier said than done, because it's still scary.
That's what I was consciously doing. That I was consciously thinking of, because I was talking to other people. Like, I was telling people to love themselves, and I was telling people to remember the good times, and I was telling people to just grieve and to feel it. And like, you had said that to me, and I was saying it to other people as far as grieve and feel it. And I was consciously doing that. Like, what, compared to the other times where I was just in autopilot, or even when I had other good things to say but couldn't actually do it, this time was different.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say is, trauma, like, we have this weird, and especially I think cops are worse than military at this. In my experience, they are, is addressing and acknowledging trauma is pretty tough for cops, for I was going to say for some reason, but for probably hundreds or at least dozens of reasons. Trauma is pretty difficult to even acknowledge for cops. But if we treated it like any other injury, like, I have a torn labrum in my shoulder, and I'm not going to have surgery on it, because at best surgery is only 50-50, and it's 100% scar tissue and 100% rehab afterwards. So It's just not worth it to have the surgery. I have a torn labrum. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to stretch it, and I'm going to have to do these things. Same thing, I have compressed disc. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to stretch out my neck and stretch out my shoulder more than I would in other parts of my body, because if I don't, they become real tight and they impact my life, and they could, potentially compound and get worse if I don't do that. The same with trauma. Just because I've done something to address this trauma now, and it might, the waves become further and further in between, to where eventually, I'm not even going to remember it unless I happen to be thinking about it. The trauma is still there. Like, it doesn't, I'm still going to grieve every time I think about them, or, it's still going to pop up. I'm still, for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to do these things. I'm going to have to do this practice, just like my torn labrum. Like, I don't know, even if we do everything perfect to properly grieve, it's still going to be there. There's no getting rid of it.
Something that's kind of an interesting spinoff of something you just said is that people tend, law enforcement certainly, and I might be the biggest the biggest whatever it is, perpetrator of this. We like to minimize our injuries, or feel like minimize our trauma, but we don't do that with our injuries. So, like, if I've got a torn labrum, it doesn't matter that you had a worse torn labrum. It doesn't matter that you've got a torn rotator cuff. Like, that doesn't, like, my labrum is still torn. The injury is still here, and it's still causing pain, regardless of whether it caused you pain or as much pain, or you handled it better, or whatever. We tend to, at least I tend to say, well, but mine isn't that bad. I shouldn't be complaining about it, or it shouldn't hurt this bad, or it shouldn't, I should be over it by now. But you don't say that when when you blow your knee out or when you sprain your ankle or whatever. Like you look at it for what it is, but we don't tend to do that with mental health.
No, yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's a cultural thing, like within America, or if it's within men, or if it's within law enforcement, or what it is. Do you think that is it particularly bad within law enforcement, do you think, or is it just all American men, or is it?
Well, I don't know. So we've had 2 decades of the global war on terrorism, and which is most of my life and most of your life is the past 2.5 decades of the global war on terrorism. Even if you weren't in the military, you saw the towers get hit, and people that went to Iraq and Afghanistan. People that maybe died there, and certainly some people that got injured there. Like, it has affected you. I feel like something that I was thinking of, and something that I've been thinking of for a couple of days now, is cops specifically, and I'm projecting on this, so I don't know if it's 100%, but cops that were cops during the global war on terror, but never went, or maybe only did one deployment or something like that, or whatever, cops that don't feel worthy, feel like that they didn't make like their injury isn't the same as the guy who got blown up, or the guy who lost a leg, or the guy who lost a buddy over there. And it can be the same exact thing. Like, you watching someone die in whatever state USA is just the same feeling that you get when you watch someone die in Afghanistan.
It's just a different geographical location.
It's a different geographical location. And cops specifically, you're still wearing a uniform and a gun. Like, you are experiencing the same. And I'll tell you, law enforcement, in my experience, I was exposed to countless, like on the order of hundreds times more trauma just in daily life in law enforcement than I ever had been in the military. But that's my personal experience. Some other people might have it different. But I feel like cops on a definitely on a weekly basis, just experience so much more than most society has no idea.
So the problem with handling trauma and dealing with emotions and mental health and all that stuff is that the reason we see it so much in law enforcement, is it because of what we experienced, or is it because of something else that happens during the career? Does that make sense?
The reason we see so much of it?
No, the reason we struggle so much with it, the reason we don't talk about it or process it, is it just because you have to stuff it down for 5 hours to get through your shift, and then by the time it's over, well, we made it through, now we don't have to deal with it? Or is it like in my case, do you think it's mostly fear, or what prevents cops from processing what maybe the normal public would?
Well, I mean, it's pretty recent, even with the military. I think the only reason the military might be better at it is because they were a little bit earlier to the ball of acknowledging trauma and PTSD. They're a little bit earlier to the ball, and the military is way more cohesive than the law enforcement, just because it's one organization, or it's 4 organizations all under one big umbrella. Like, there are Department of Defense, a big part of the Department of, I don't know if it's a big part, but some portion of the Department of Defense has been for a while dedicated to acknowledging and treating the trauma that servicemen and women have been going through for the last 25 years. And that just doesn't exist in law enforcement. It maybe has started in the last 5 years to come out, but
Yeah, but
it's still
man, that
fairly recent. And I know it's getting a lot of blowback. No one respects that, or very few people do, but everyone mocks it. A lot of people do.
yeah, I think that's getting a little bit better. But the to your point of like in the military, you've got basically four branches, and it's
Yeah.
going to be the same generally speaking. I would think across the board. Whereas
Yeah.
law enforcement, I mean, I don't even know how many agencies there are, and all it takes is a captain or a chief or a sheriff or somebody in the command staff to discount or discredit or just not buy into um, wellness, and you could have a completely different experience
Yeah.
than the agency across town where they do prioritize mental health or they do focus on wellness or at least acknowledge it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Um, I don't know. I think we're making progress to that. Another thing is maybe geographically Midwestern, something to say for the liberal, woke, whatever, like the coast, what people would normally associate with the left. I think they have been a lot faster and a lot better to jump on this caring for mental health than maybe the more conservative folks have been. Does it seem like
Yeah,
that in your view?
I don't know. I don't know that I've noticed that, but I would just agree with it without even digging in because it makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I feel like at least the politically conservative are
Yeah,
more like pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
definitely.
just get to work, um, and not necessarily in a good way. Whereas the politically left seems like they're more compassionate or at least more focused on like mental health or
Yeah.
behavioral health. I was
Yeah.
thinking
Well,
of, I was kind of thinking about that this morning in a little bit of in a different vein when I was running and was really struggling on the way back. And I was kind of just self-talk and trying to get myself through the run. And I was just like, sometimes you just got to put your head down and just get to work. Like, don't look
yeah.
don't look at the horizon. Don't look at the next mailbox or street light, whatever. Like, just put your head down and keep moving your feet. And
Yeah.
I think there's a time for that. I think there's a time and
Yeah.
place for like, you just got to deal with it. Like, just push through, but you can't
Yeah.
like that's not a long-term, it's not going to
No.
be a long-term successful strategy.
Yeah. So I think with mental health, and maybe we can apply this to lots of different areas, but specifically with mental health, there are pros and cons on each side. Like sometimes you do need to David Goggins it out and just get to work. And sometimes you do need to just, sometimes you just need to be cold. And sometimes you just need to
Yeah.
do it. And then other times you need to address this. And it I think the trouble comes from when we're married to one or the other, or when we solidly plant ourselves in one or the other. And I feel like that's not intelligent to do that, to plant yourself in one camp. Doesn't make
Now say
sense.
now say that again. I think you're onto something, but say it again.
So, I said sometimes we need to David Goggins it. Sometimes we need to just put our head down and run, just like you were saying. Sometimes we need to finish the fight. But, it's actually when you're in a fight, the only thing you need to do is finish the
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah.
But other times, you're not always going to be in the fight. Once you're out of the fight, you need to treat yourself, or else you're going to bleed out. You're going to die. They're going to win, even if you killed them. Even if you beat the bad guy, you're still going to die if you don't treat yourself. So when the fight's over, man, you have to address your second chest wound. You know what I mean? You have to address these things, or else you're going to die. The problem comes whenever we plant ourselves in one camp, when we plant ourselves in the self-care. And I say that as someone who I think I'm in a self-care season, by the way. But if I planted myself here and never left the self-care season, I would never get anything done. Or if I was always here, I wouldn't be able to provide for my family, or I wouldn't have made it this far if I was always in the self-care mode. But if I'm always in the fight and always in sucking it up, you don't know it, but you're defeating yourself, and everything that you stood up for to protect your family against, to protect the community against, this protector persona, you're defeating by staying there. It's not smart to stay there. The wisdom comes is to learn when and how to pivot, when and how to adjust. Necessary for survival.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really smart. I lost you there.
And I'm preaching to myself. Oh, I was just, it might have been when I was in silence. I was just waiting to hear. But I said, the wisdom is when and how to pivot, and when and how to adjust. You have to do that, or else you're going to die.
Yeah, and I think that we just tend to, we're comfortable with what we know. We're comfortable doing what we've done with what we're doing, and even when it's not given the results we want, it's not healthy. It's not, it's not producing the desired results. We tend to still stay with it because, well, at least I know how to do this. I'm doing it wrong, but I know how to do it. It's kind of the concept of, like, clearly, if the only time I can process emotion is when I'm drunk, then clearly that's not the way to do it. But at least that's a way to do it. At least that's a way.
No, go ahead.
Good.
Oh, I was going to say, why alcohol and substances in general, but I think specifically alcohol, the reason why it's so dangerous is because it works. In the short term, it works. Like, you are able to bring up these emotions when you're normally not able to. So that's why, even psychologically, like, oh, we need to do that again.
Yeah, because you need, your mind, you need to let it go. You need to process it. You need to let it out. And if that's the only way you know how to do it, then that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, if your body learns, like, oh, we let this go whenever we get to this state, we need to get to that state.
Yep. Now, what's weird, or what's maybe interesting, is when I was in that situation, I didn't realize that, like, I obviously I knew that I tended to get more emotional when I would drink a lot, but I wouldn't have said, well, that's the only way I know how to process emotion. I would have just assumed that I was doing things right because, I hadn't broke down and I hadn't lost my temper. Everything seemed like it was under control, but it was only under control because I knew I had an outlet coming up. You know what I mean? Like, I knew I had a way to let it out in the evening when I got home from work.
And what's really dangerous is when, and this is all hypothetical, I'm sure we've never been here or known anyone, but if you are, say you experience trauma and you learn that if you drink, you can address, or at least, suppress whatever, you can comfort that trauma. And if you are performing a job and maybe you're even good at that job, well, now you got a double whammy to bury your emotions. And so I know that I can go to work and be a rock star and not have to deal with anything. Then when I come home, I can drown in a bottle and, do whatever, feel good, survive the night, and then go to bed and repeat it. I've got a system. Yeah. And then what's even more dangerous than that is when you lose that career, when you lose that identity of whatever it was that you were a rock star at. Say you lose that, and now all you have is and yourself. Then, God forbid, you get yourself out of the bottle, because now all you have are these demons that you're going to have to address.
Yeah. So now you don't even have the help, or at least what you thought was help. You don't have the thing to mask it. That was something
that,
else that I had done. Go ahead.
I was going to say that feels like an impossible scenario. I know that because I've been there.
Yeah.
That feels like you have lost your world. You have lost everything, and you're no good to anyone. When you're in that frame of mind, and I'm speaking this from experience. When you lose your job and you feel like you lose your family and you lose all this identity. Oh, I was a this, I was a that, and I'm not that anymore. Like, oh well, I'm no good to anyone. I'm actually a burden. Is the dangerous pitfall that you have to honestly fight, and that's no slight. You have to fight to get out of that, like literally for your survival, and for the survival of your kids, and for the survival of your family and all your loved ones, and everything that you can still provide. You have to fight for that survival, because that is a hard, sticky place.
Yeah. One of the areas that I think it's especially easy, or at least it was very easy for me, was just losing yourself in work, because if you work a bunch of overtime, nobody's going, like, you're only going to get high fives. You get more money. You're a team player. There was a time when I was just working a stupid amount of overtime, like an unhealthy amount of overtime. But
I remember that time.
I was working 20 hours a day, between working part-times and overtime gigs and all that. And I remember, and that was for a while. That was for a long time. There was only one person.
I remember talking to you about that, and you were like, I think I can do this for a solid year. And if I do it for a year, I'm good. I'm like, a year? Dude, you can't survive a week doing that.
That's the same mindset that says I really only have to consume 500 calories a week. It comes from the same place.
Okay.
No, but what I realized though is that man, you could work 20 hours a day. Nobody's gonna, you're not gonna have any performance issues, right? They're not gonna get onto you for not coming to work. You're being a good team player. But there's only one person that ever asked, man, are you sure? Like, are you getting enough rest? Like, are you healthy? And of course, I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm fine. But obviously I wasn't fine. But if you drown yourself in a bottle or drugs or anything like that, there's going to be more obvious signs. But if you just become a workaholic, you just get more money and people appreciate you.
Yeah.
So that can be another pitfall that I think we tend to fall into.
And they're all doing the same thing. They're all running away from the problem. They're all trying to escape the problem or problems, whatever, there's usually more than one, but it's all avoidance. And I'd say it's all subconscious. Like, I don't think you start off drinking by thinking, oh, this is going to solve all my problems. And eventually I'm going to become deathly addicted to it.
Yeah. You just need a little bit of a break. You need a little bit of space.
Yeah.
I earned time to clear your head. Yep. And then tomorrow you need the same thing. And then, and I think it's important too to recognize that it's not that, to avoid those things isn't it's a very normal feeling. It's a very normal fear. It's not cowardice. It's not weak. It makes sense why you would want to avoid these feelings. They're scary. Yeah. They're painful.
They hurt.
Terrifying. Yes. Like, of course you want to avoid it. Well, hey, awkward place to end this conversation.
You're not going to end this conversation here, are you?
Well, no, unless you got something else. I'm pulling apart some meat.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I was going to say you're pressed for something. We can.
Do you want to pick it back up?
We can, or we'll pick it back up in our next thing. We have Oh, I mean, I guess 2 hours with this conversation mixed with the old one. That'll all be one conversation. We probably have 2 hours or so of stuff. I mean, we're good. There's just so much meat there. We're gonna have to jump back into that.
We're gonna have to.
We will.
We'll address it again.
All right, homie. Well, get your meat straight, and I'm gonna focus on driving.
All right, thanks, buddy.
All right,
see ya. Bye.